So Bruce, what are the joys and oys of being an author?
The joys and oys. Well, the joys and oys of being an author. Well, we've been talking about body mechanics and use and all that good stuff. And the last 7 years, I was writing this very comprehensive biography of Alfred Korzybski, and one of the rules that I have, that I came up with for basic body use, was make use of postural variety. And what can happen when you're spending long hours working at a computer. I did most of my writing at the keyboard.
Yeah.
If I sit for that period of time, I have troubles.
Yeah.
I've never had to go to a practitioner for my back or my neck, because I've always managed it with the Alexander and physical therapy and a little help from my trained friends. I've been able to manage any problems that I've had. But I was noticing that my back was really starting to be bothersome. So I decided to, since I have a laptop and I was working with that, I put the laptop on top of a file cabinet that was a reasonable height.
Yeah.
It may have not been exactly perfect. And I wrote most of the book and did most of the research standing up. And since it would have been better if I was on one of those little, now they sell special computer desks where you can attach to a treadmill and run it at a low speed and walk while you're working. So that would have been better. But even though my legs would get stiff, I was overall much better when I wrote that way. And then the final phase of the book was involved with editing and page setting and a lot of technical stuff related to the formatting of the book.
Yeah.
And at that point, I was using a desktop with a larger screen to facilitate my vision, and I had to sit more often and for longer periods of time. That was much more of a pain. There was more of the oi than the joy with that in the physical level anyhow. So but you have to start thinking, if you're interested in using yourself better and having better body mechanics, because that's become important to you, then it's really necessary to be more conscious of the variety, and making sure that I walk a lot because I'm part of a morning minyan at a Chabad, which is about 1.5 miles away from me. And so I have to get up in the morning, and when it's dark and cool, I walk 1.5 miles, have the minyan, schmooze with my friends, and then come back. It's another 1.5 miles. Then I work all day, and I make sure at night that, for the most part, I walk another 3 miles. So I may walk 5 to 6 miles a day, and I did that through the whole period of time that I was writing. That made a tremendous difference, I'm sure. Although I still put on a lot of weight, which I'm losing now gradually. I've lost about 30 pounds.
Why is sitting so bad for you?
My friend and colleague Galen Krantz, you may have heard of, teaches the Alexander technique.
She's at UC Berkeley?
Yeah, she's a teacher in the design. I'm not sure where I think was in the sociology department, but she's teaching with an interesting area that has to do with design.
Crossover.
And she wrote
a book on the history of the chair.
Oh yeah, it's an excellent book.
Yeah.
I would recommend it to anybody. And after all the stuff she goes into about body use and different kinds of chairs and how you can change things with chairs in order to be able to sit better.
Right.
when it comes down to it, the bottom line is chairs are bad for you. Sitting is bad for you.
Yeah.
And the more you do it, the worse off you're going to be. You got to move.
Yeah.
And that's the deal. So if you're going to sit, you have to, it's necessary. And this is just a general thing that people who have back pain that haven't studied anything.
Mm-hmm.
I can't, they'll typically say, I can't sit anymore. I have to get up.
Yeah.
Or I've been standing too long, I have to sit down. The variety is just really necessary. So that's how I've used that in my career as a writer. I found my training in physical therapy and Alexander very useful, just to keep me from falling apart.
So if one does have a job that requires sitting to like get up and walk around for what, 10 minutes an hour?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that it would be good if more employers had more of an understanding, and that they're not just hiring a person, they're not just hiring an accounting program.
Right.
They're hiring an accountant who's a person.
Right.
Who has there's a person and an organism attached to that accounting program, so to speak.
Yeah.
And it'd be good if the employers paid more attention to the person.
Yeah.
And took that into account, so made their work a little bit more comfortable and amenable, because they'd actually work better.
So you mentioned that you spent the last 7 years writing a book of Alfred Korzybski.
Yeah.
So what percentage of your work time were you involved in that book, and what percentage of you was involved in physical therapy the last 7 years?
I'd say 99% of my work time was writing the book. And
wow, and 1% was physical.
Something like that. Close enough. It was
How do you deal with the isolating tendencies of writing?
For me, it was the minion made a big difference.
Yeah.
It's the Jewish, for people who aren't Jewish, it's
prayer quorum of 10 men.
Prayer quorum of 10 men that's required for certain things. So if somebody has to say the Kaddish, which is the memorial prayer for the dead, say for their, usually a husband, a wife, a son, a daughter,
yeah,
or a parent, and it's usually for a parent, that's required 10 people. So you really have to, if they depend on you to be there,
yeah,
you really have to, you feel like you have to be there.
Yeah.
So there was a motivation every morning to get up at 5:30. There still is.
Yeah.
So I can be there for my friends and anybody else who comes who wants to say that prayer. That comes down to it. And just being with, I have some very close friends at that synagogue, and just being with them every morning, and after the davening, the praying is over, schmoozing with your friends. We have somebody who actually makes breakfast for us, a kosher breakfast.
Wow.
Every morning.
Wow.
It's incredible. So that really sustained me tremendously,
yeah,
over the 7 years.
Yeah.
And my wife, of course. But on the other hand, I like quiet. I like being alone. We live in a condo in a fairly quiet condominium complex.
Yeah.
And I would like it even more quiet. We're both, I've joked, but it's like we're both hermits.
Yeah.
And I like being alone. Now I'm in a situation where that book is done, and now I'm in a different mode. I have to, in order to get the message out of what the stuff that I've written, I have to get myself out and